Hey everybody, it's me, it's Jake. I'm trying to figure out how this microphone works. I got this fancy microphone Alex gave me. I'm trying to see if it works. Can you hear me? Is it sounding good? Is it loud? Is it quiet? I had a Fortnite stream on and I just got a notification for this. Well, this is the perfect balance, perfect pairing with some Fortnite. Yeah, I can hear it. Excellent. No, we can't hear you. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm getting a good from Gorbis and Aiden. So Wavy, I think I'm a little quiet. Okay. Let me see if. How about now? How's that? Is that better? Worse? Worse? Better? Hello? Good. Louder and better. Excellent. Okay, cool. So this is my philosophy show now, work in progress, as all of my side projects are. I'm committed to this black and white camera. I think I look best in monochrome, so we're going to stick with monochrome so as not to distract anybody. Loud Jake. Oh, loud Jake. Interesting. Too loud? Perfectly loud? Music is quiet? Yeah, music should be quiet for right now, although I can boost it a little bit. That's just kind of to give a little bit of zhuzh to the background. We're going to turn off the music in a bit so that we can watch a video. We are going to be watching a lecture series. We're not going to watch the whole thing right now because it is a 12-part series, each an hour long. It is a course taught at Harvard by Professor Michael Sandell, a political philosopher. Don't really know too much about his professional career. I think he worked in the Bush administration, so do with that what you will, as the moral bioethicist something. I don't know. We can look it up. We can look up his Wikipedia. Maybe we'll start with that. Love the Bush administration. Yeah, Bush administration's tight. This is a pro-Bush administration stream. Historical moral presidency. Yeah. Actually, let's go ahead. Let's jump in. Let's look him up before we jump into it. We'll do a brief covering of his background just so we know who we're listening to. But he's a good lecturer. I'll say that. I don't know too much about his political leanings or his personal morality, but he's good at talking about morality. I'll give him that much. I've watched this lecture series probably 2 or 3 times, but not in a minute. So it's gonna be a journey for all of us. Me, sort of a retreading of familiar content. You, perhaps for the first time. All this content's available for free on YouTube. I encourage people to go check out YouTube for all learning things. I'm assuming if you know how to use Twitch, you probably are already familiar with the font of information that is free online courses on YouTube. But yeah, Harvard just posts a bunch of really good content like videos and lectures and stuff for free. I think a number of other Ivy League schools do the same. So definitely worth checking out. But we're going to go to the Wikipedia page now. Let's see if I can figure out OBS. Take us there. Hello. So here we are. We're on the Wikipedia page for Michael Sandell. Michael Sandell. Okay, so here, I'm going to read a quick bio. You can read along if you'd like. I guess I'll keep the music going for right now before we jump into the lecture. So Michael Sandell, born 1953, American political philosopher. He is the A&T and Robert B. Mass Professor of Government Theory at Harvard Law, where his course Justice was one of the university's first courses to be made freely available online and on television. So that is the course that we're going to be watching and discussing today. The course is just called Justice, so if that's confusing for anybody, it is not. It is a course on justice, but the name of the course is also just Justice, which is why it is capitalized. And it has been viewed by tens of millions of people around the world, including China, which is an interesting way to put that. Around the world and China, where Sandell was named the most influential foreign figure of the year. So do with that what you will. He is also known for his critique of John Rawls' A Theory of Justice in his first book, Liberalism and the Limits of Justice. And John Rawls, for those of you who don't know, is sort of like the preeminent modern thinker on morality and justice. A lot of modern American justice theory is based on, Vail. Okay, yes. So Gorbis knows his Rawls. But yeah, Sandell is one of the people who has written critique on John Rawls, specifically the Veil of Ignorance, which we will cover later. I think they cover Veil of Ignorance probably in like episode 8 or 9, so we're not going to get to Veil of Ignorance probably today or for a few streams, but and he mostly agrees with the Veil of Ignorance, from what I know. He just does a couple of like really basic critiques. We'll do a little quick bio, early life education. Sandell was born in 1953 to a Jewish, shouts out, family, which moved to LA, shouts out. When he was 13, he was president of the senior class at Palisades High School, graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Brandeis with a bachelor's degree in politics, and received his doctorate from Balliol College, don't know that. Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar, where he studied under philosopher Charles Taylor. Citation needed. So potentially not true, but not sure why someone would lie about that. So Rhodes Scholar, pretty good track record here, smart guy. Philosophical views, we'll cover this real quick. Sandell subscribed to a certain version of communitarianism, although he is uncomfortable with the label. And in his vein, he is perhaps best known for his critique of John Rawls' Theory of Justice. So this is what we were just talking. Charles Taylor put that line in. Yeah, Charles Taylor trying to distance himself from Sandell here, I suppose. So this is his critique of Veil of Ignorance, which again, we're not going to really dive too deeply into right now. Rawls' argument depends on the assumption of the Veil of Ignorance, which he claims allows us to become unencumbered selves. So that's Rawls' argument. Sandell's view is that we are by nature encumbered to an extent that makes it impossible, even in the hypothetical, to have such a veil. So again, this is probably not going to make a super lot of sense if you don't know what the Veil of Ignorance is. Some examples of such ties are those with our families, which we do not make by conscious choice, but are born with, already attached. Because they are not consciously acquired, it is impossible to separate oneself from such ties. Sandell believes in a much less restrictive, looser version of the Veil of Ignorance should be postulated. Criticism such as Sandell's inspired Rawls to subsequently argue that his theory of justice was not a metaphysical theory, but a political one, a basis on which an overriding consensus could be formed among individuals or groups with many different moral political views. So Rawls was like, actually, JK, you kind of right about this, but actually no, because I wasn't actually even saying that in the first place. Justice. Okay, so this just kind of like talks about other stuff he's taught. We're just going to watch the thing, so we don't really have to talk about that. Sandell also teaches with Douglas Melton a seminar in ethics and biotechnology. This is what he did in the Bush administration. This is where he worked in the Bush administration. He was the President's Council on Bioethics. So not 100% sure what policy stuff Bush did with bioethics. We'd have to look that up. But there you go. Authorship, yeah, he wrote this book challenging the veil. Stem cells. Yeah, maybe stem cells. Interesting. All right, so we are just going to jump in. We're going to watch this lecture. We're probably going to like stop and start throughout the thing to talk about what is happening. We're going to, over the course of the lecture, Sandell poses a lot of questions to, being on a presidential council doesn't necessarily mean that you adopt the president's positions on anything. Yeah. I don't know what Sandell's personal political leanings are, but yeah, just because he was working in that administration doesn't necessarily mean that he subscribed to all of Bush's perspectives or even is a Republican, but I don't know for sure. In search of followers, primes, or views? Yes, I am. I'm going to hit you up right after this, ZS12345 WASD 83. Stick around. Okay, so over the course of this lecture, Sandell's going to ask a bunch of questions to the audience, which are presumably Harvard undergrad students, or maybe graduate students. I don't know if this course is taught at the law school or just as like a general intro course for undergrads. What's up, Pale Brew? But he asked questions to the audience, and there's sort of like an open dialogue between the students, which is really fun. This was also, just bear in mind that this was released on YouTube in 2009. I don't know when the actual recording took place, presumably 2009 or earlier. So I don't know. I don't know how much things in the world of ethics, justice, and morality have changed since then, but it does make for some interesting fashion choices by some of the students. And yeah, when Sandell poses questions to the students, I'm going to pull up polls so that we can also vote and get a sense. I don't know if there's going to be enough people in the chat where it will even really matter. You can also just like say what you think in the chat, and I'll try to read it and we could talk about it there. But I have this poll app, so I'm going to use it. Justice is for undergrads. Yeah, I think that's right. The kids look like undergrads in this thing. How do I say what I think? You can say it out loud quietly to yourself, or if you'd like, you can use your fingers to type it into the chat. So without further ado, I am now going to bring down this banger of a song, and we are going to start the lecture. And also let me know how the audio on this is. Audio is nearly non-existent. Okay, tight. So I'm going to pause that. I don't know why that is, so stand by. Off to a good start. Advanced audio properties. Beep. Let's see if this does anything. Look at this insane intro, by the way. This thing is sponsored by pomegranate juice.
This is a course about justice, and we begin with a story.
How's that? Is that better, worse, the same? Still not loud enough? Why would Palm sponsor this? I have no idea. It's really interesting. Better, but still way low. Okay. Max out on. It's like pretty loud in my headphones. Stand by. What can I do here? The source volume is maxed out here. I'm using desktop audio, and I have the source audio like settings in my advanced audio properties in here. I'm just gonna, oh wait, you can't see that because it's window capture. I have it like boosted by 22 decibels. It's like maxed the fuck out. Let me open my audio mixer here. Hello. Chrome up. Hello. Yeah, earlier it was working just fine, and now it's like soups quiet. Why is it so quiet? I can hear it perfectly in my headphones. Looks like the volume is low on, yeah, it is super low.
Car is hurtling down the track at 60.
But now it's like super loud in my headphones, which is sort of annoying.
60 miles an hour. And at the end of the track, you notice 5 workers working on the track. You try to stop, but you can't. Your brakes don't work. You feel desperate because you know that if you crash into these 5
How's
workers,
that?
they will all die.
Is that good?
Let's assume you know that for sure.
Still low?
And so you feel helpless.
pretty good. I just don't understand why, because now it's like breaking my eardrums in my headphones. How can I make it quieter in my headphones, but loud enough for you guys? Pretty good is what I'm hearing. I have it like mega cranked on these advanced audio properties here. It's so low. Why? I don't understand. Yeah, super quiet again. I don't know what's happening here. Let me do a quick Google. Can you guys hear this? Oh, wait, we might have a fix here, folks. I'm watching a YouTube video. It's insanely low quality. Hello, can I? It's telling me to go to File. It's telling me to go to Edit. It's telling me to go to Advanced Audio Properties. Jake learns OBS in real time. Bruh, I was just here. Volume percent, that's interesting. Active sources only. Yo, I'm right here. What do you want from me, bruh? When did this video come out? 2018. Thank you. Loving this content. Yeah, the content is quality. Bro. Desktop audio low on stream, loud in headset. What can you do? Reduce headset master volume in Windows, increase game volume. Is this lecture a game? Kind of. I swear to God, this was just working right before I started the stream. Mr. Thor, hey, yo, tell us what he's saying while it's playing. Oh, that's a good idea. Let me. Are there like Windows heads? Are there Windows? Can I like turn down headset volume? No. Spatial sound? Sounds? Troubleshooting sound problems? I'm gonna troubleshoot sound problems. We'll see if that does anything. Mr. Thor does lectures too? Mr. Thor does it all. What the F? What the F? What happens if I go back to this camera and then I play the audio? Does that do anything? Nope. Still quiet. Turn it down 4 watts. This is really good. This is going great, guys. It was decent before you messed with something. I don't know. Hold on. I want to just... Nope. Nope. Audio input capture. What if I added another capture that is desktop audio? Would that break everything? Can't do that. Can't do that. Hello? Hello? Uh-oh. That's not good. We don't want that. Remove that. Hello. Okay, I'm gonna show you this. More of this. Okay, so look at this. Check this ish out. So I'm gonna make OBS big. OBS. Whoa, that's not good. That's not what we want. All right, I guess that's fine for right now. So here is my mixer. Yeah. And now I'm going to play this video. It's so loud in my headphones. I cannot stress how loud it is in my headphones. And look, we're maxed out here. And I go here. And I guess I can crank this to the maximum. What if I do
track? There's one worker. Your steering wheel works, so you can turn the trolley
that's like
car,
as
if you
max
want
out
to,
as possible
onto the side track, killing the one, but sparing the five.
You can hear him now? It's so loud in my headphones though. How do I make it not be so? If I turn it down on my computer, it's going to turn down on everything. So I just have to have this super loud audio in my headphones? Is that how it's going to have to be? I guess so. Don't your Windows audio settings have a headphone bar? I don't know. Let's find out. Here, actually. They just have like device. I have speakers, I have Asus. I just have like a headphones plugged in to my laptop here. But let's see if I go to my sound and mixer options, master volume, blah, 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 system sound, master volume, output. It's saying it's outputting through my speakers, but right click sound icon in taskbar, go to sound mixer. Yeah, it says it's outputting through my speakers, but I just have I have headphones plugged into my laptop. So it's like, it thinks that my headphones are the speakers. Like, it doesn't recognize that a pair of headphones has been plugged in here. System sound. Google Chrome. What if I do this? What if I bring this down? Does that fuck our shit up? Let me try.
Here's our first question.
That makes it quieter for you, right?
What would you do?
Yep.
Let's take a poll.
What if I do this?
How many would
That's nothing.
turn the trolley car onto
if
the
I do
side
this?
track? Raise your hands. How many wouldn't? How many would go straight ahead?
Oh, wait. I think we're... Is this?
Keep your hands up, those of you who would go straight ahead.
Is that still loud-ish for you guys?
A handful of people would. The vast majority
Is that, like,
would
audible?
turn. Let's hear first.
Is this
Now we need to begin to investigate
noticeably
the
lower
reasons why you think
than this?
it's the right thing to do. Let's
This?
begin with those in the majority
This.
who would turn to go onto the side track.
Are you hearing a difference between
Why
this
would you do it? What would be your reason? Who's willing to
and
volunteer
this?
a reason? Go ahead, stand up.
This
Because
is so
it can't
dumb.
be right to kill 5 people when you can only kill
This?
1 person instead.
Option A,
It wouldn't be right to kill 5
option
if you could
B.
kill 1 person instead. That
This is fine for me. I'm going to start it now. I'm going to get rid of this. Nobody is responding. Oh, same. It's the same. Okay, cool. Awesome. For some reason now OBS is not updating my chat, but that's fine. Okay. Right or left? Okay, I think we're good. So now the question becomes, can you hear clearly this?
Keep your hands
Oh, I
up,
can
those
actually
of you
crank
who
it
go
now
straight
because my
ahead.
master volume I can control.
A handful of people would. The vast majority would turn. Let's hear first. Now we need to begin to investigate the reasons why you think it's the right thing to do. Let's begin with those in the majority who would turn to go onto the side.
We're gonna start over. Does anyone not know the trolley car problem? We're doing the trolley car problem for those of you that are not aware. It's decent, good enough. Yeah, crank it on your end. I'm gonna do some experimenting the next time. I don't know what the fuck is happening. But we're gonna start. Decent. If it's audible, that's all I care about. I can even maybe. Hello? Does this? Hello?
This is a course about justice, and we begin with a story. Suppose you're the driver of a trolley car, and your trolley car is
All right, last check-in. Are you able to hear this? I promise we're going to start now.
hurtling down the track at 60 miles an hour. And at the end of the track, you notice
Beautiful.
5 workers.
All right, here we go. We're starting.
This is a course about justice, and we begin with a story. Suppose you're the driver of a trolley car, and your trolley car is hurtling down the track at 60 miles an hour. And at the end of the track, you notice 5 workers working on the track. You try to stop, but you can't. Your brakes don't work. You feel desperate because you know that if you crash into these 5 workers, they will all die. Let's assume you know that for sure.
Gorbis, I think low.
And so you feel helpless until you notice that there is, off to the right, a side track. And at the end of that track,
Yeah, he really looks like
there's
Putin.
one worker working on the track. Your steering wheel works, so you can turn the trolley car, if you want to, onto the side track, killing the one, but sparing the 5. Here's our first question. What's the right thing to do? What would you do? Let's take a poll. How many would
Let's take a
turn
poll.
the trolley car onto the side track? Raise your hands. How many wouldn't? How many would go straight ahead? Keep your hands up, those of you who would go straight ahead. A handful of people would. The vast majority would turn. Let's hear first. Now we need to begin to investigate the reasons why you think it's the right thing to do. Let's begin with those in the majority who would turn to go onto the side track. Why would you do it? What would be your reason? Who's willing to volunteer a reason? Go ahead, stand up.
Because it can't be right to kill 5 people when you can only kill 1 person instead.
It's pretty strong logic.
It wouldn't be right to kill 5 if you could kill 1 person instead.
Good take.
That's a good reason. That's a good reason. Who else? Does everybody agree with that reason? Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking it was the same reason on 9/11 with regard to people who flew the plane into the Pennsylvania field as heroes because they chose to kill the people in the plane and not kill more people in big buildings.
So the principle there was the same on 9/11.
You got to bear in mind that this was 2009, potentially earlier. 9/11 a little more relevant at this
Is
time.
that the reason most of you had, those of you who would?
But I love big buildings.
Let's hear now from those in the minority, those who wouldn't turn. Yes.
This guy.
I think that's the same type of mentality that justifies genocide and totalitarianism. In order to save one type of race, you wipe out the other.
So what would you do in this case? You would...
Really interesting perspective there. Don't fully understand the logic. I don't think we ever quite get an explanation.
Crash into the five and kill them?
Presumably, yes. Yeah.
Okay, who else? It's a brave answer. Thank you. Let's consider another trolley car case and see whether those of you in the majority want to adhere to the principle better that one should die so that five should live. This time you're not the driver of the trolley car, you're an onlooker. You're standing on a bridge overlooking a trolley car track. And down the track comes a trolley car. At the end of the track are 5 workers. The brakes don't work. The trolley car is about to careen into the 5 and kill them. And now, you're not the driver.
Gorbis, yeah, I feel like that last guy was like, just kind of like
standing next to you,
play devil's advocate or like mind game. He's like, he's expecting a trick question here.
The bridge is a very fat man. And you could give him a shove.
This is where it gets interesting.
He would fall over the bridge, onto the track, right in the way of the trolley car. He would die, but he would spare the 5. Now, how many would push the fat man over the bridge? Raise your hand. How many wouldn't? Most people wouldn't. Here's the obvious question. What became of the principle? Better to save 5 lives even if it means sacrificing 1. What became of the principle that almost everyone endorsed in the first case?
All right, I want to pause right here before we start getting answers from the students. Because I think it's a good question. Well, first answers to the questions, if you want to answer. In a real life situation, I wouldn't, but in this fake contrived scenario, yeah, I think that is part of the reason why a lot of people struggle with this is because your brain cannot it automatically wants to put it into a real world scenario where obviously pushing one fat guy in front of a moving vehicle is not going to stop it, and you will likely end up injuring more people that way. So you don't people just are not willing to accept the hypothetical that it is a guarantee in this scenario that if you push one person that it will stop. But so I don't know, that's my perspective on why I think so many people switch on this one, because their brain is just I can't see a scenario where pushing a person in front of a vehicle is going to stop it. Gorba says, I think something about using someone as a blunt tool, like something to use, feels wrong instinctively. Yeah, there's somebody who makes an argument sort of similar to that coming up. So I'm going to start it back up. Keep answering though in the chat. I'm going to keep reading stuff.
I need to hear from someone who is in the majority in both cases. How do you explain the difference between the two? Yes.
The second one, I guess, involves an active choice of pushing the person down, which I guess that person himself would otherwise not have been involved in this situation at all. And so to choose on his behalf, I guess, to involve him in something that he otherwise would have escaped is, I guess, more than what you have in the first case, where the 3 parties, the driver and the 2 sets of workers are already, I guess, in the situation.
This answer doesn't make any sense to me.
The one on the track off to the side, he didn't choose to sacrifice his life any more than the fat man did he?
Yeah.
That's true, but he was on the tracks. And you...
This guy was on the bridge. Go ahead, you can come back if you want.
This is sort of like a proximity argument, which doesn't really follow, in my opinion.
Very well. It's a hard question. Who else can find a way of reconciling the reaction of the majority in these two cases. Yes?
Well, I guess in the first case where you have the one worker and the five, it's choice between those two, and you have to make a certain choice, and people are going to die because of the trolley car, not necessarily because of your direct actions. The trolley car is a runaway thing, and you're making a split-second choice, whereas pushing the fat man over is an actual act of murder on your part. You have control over that, whereas you may not have control over the trolley car.
Yeah, this is the argument that you're making, Alex. That's what this kid is kind of getting
who has
at.
A reply? No, that's good. Who has a way? Who wants to reply? Is that a way out of this?
I don't think that's a very good reason, because you choose to. It's either way you have to choose who dies, because you either choose to turn and kill the person, which is an active conscious thought to turn, or you choose to push the fat man over, which is also an active conscious action. So either way you're making a choice.
Do you want to reply?
Well, I'm not really sure that that's the case. It just still seems kind of different. The act of actually pushing someone over onto the tracks and killing him. You are actually killing him yourself.
You're pushing him with your own hands.
You're pushing him. And that's
Right.
different than steering something that is going to cause death into another. You know, it doesn't
good.
really sound right saying it now.
No, it's good.
I'm up here.
Yeah,
Let's-
degree of detachment
Andrew.
is sort of the argument
Let me ask
there.
you this question, Andrew.
Yes.
Suppose standing on the bridge next to the fat man, I didn't have to push him. Suppose he were standing over a trap door that I could open by turning a steering wheel like that. Would you turn?
For some reason, that still just seems more wrong.
Right?
I mean, maybe if you accidentally leaned into the steering wheel or something like that. But or say that the car is hurtling towards a switch that will drop the trap. Then I could
All
agree
right,
with
fair,
that.
Fair enough. It still seems wrong in a way that it doesn't seem wrong in the first case to turn, you say.
And in another way, I mean, in the first situation, you're involved directly with the situation. In the second one, you're an onlooker as well.
All right.
So you have the choice of becoming involved or not by
All right,
pushing the fat man.
Let's forget for the moment about this case. That's good. Let's imagine a different case. This time you're a doctor in an emergency room, and 6 patients come to you. They've been in a terrible trolley car wreck. 5 of them sustained moderate injuries. 1 is severely injured. You could spend all day caring for the 1 severely injured victim, but in that time the 5 would die. Or you could look after the 5, restore them to health, but during that time the 1 severely injured person would die. How many would save the 5? Now is the doctor. How many would save the 1? Very few people. Just a handful of people. Same reason, I assume. 1 life versus 5? Now consider another doctor case. This time you're a transplant surgeon, and you have 5 patients, each in desperate need of an organ transplant in order to survive. 1 needs a heart, 1 a lung, 1 a kidney, 1 a liver, and the 5th, a pancreas. And you have no organ donors. You are about to see them die. And then it occurs to you that in the next room, there's a healthy guy who came in for a checkup. And he's... You like that? And he's taking a nap. You could go in very quietly, yank out the 5 organs, that person would die, but you could save the 5. How many would do it?
All right, I want to pause here again. Okay, so this I feel like is a better alternative, basically essentially the same premise as the fat man on the tracks thing, but I think a more it's easier to comprehend a situation like this because it doesn't require some destruction of physics where a fat guy can stop a moving train. But same principle, right? Like you are essentially tasked with deciding whether to sacrifice one life for the sake of 5. And it seems like everybody on the initial trolley car problem was totally comfortable being like, yes, I will divert the trolley, kill the one guy, save the 5 people. Seems like a no-brainer. But now we introduce this other scenario where it's the doctor, and you can kill one healthy guy, take his 5 organs, and give them to 5 dying people, saving the lives of 5 people. Presumably against his will, assuming that this healthy guy does not subscribe to this idea. You'd presumably be forcing him or somehow unwillingly extracting these organs from him. So I guess it's a contrived scenario that I can't imagine existing without external consequences. You will be forever labeled a murderer. You will lose medical license. Sure. I mean, yes, there are. I mean, right now we're just talking about like the moral, like what is the moral choice, not necessarily the consequences that will befall you. I mean, theoretically, like the consequences should not necessarily weigh on the morality of the decision. I mean, I suppose like it will affect the inverse is true. Like the morality of a decision will affect the consequences. If you're going to make a fully moral choice, you have to think about the big picture too. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, the consequences that will befall onto yourself, I don't know necessarily if those should weigh into a moral decision. I guess. I mean, like, I guess it's like the idea of like, is it moral to steal, like things like that, where it's like if you have a starving family, like, does it become more morally acceptable to steal as opposed to if you don't need it? Like, the consequences of not doing it affect whether or not it's morally righteous to do the thing. But I guess, I mean, what do you guys think? Does anybody vacuum morality? Yeah, vacuum morality, exactly. You can assume those things away for the sake of the thought experiment. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the idea. So like, assuming that you get away with it. Let's just say that, like, that you can do this and like, they can't pin it on you. Like even with the reality that like, it is murder, like legally, like in this universe. Let's assume that somehow you leave no evidence. There's you are able to get away with this action. It's like cannibalism. It's considered immoral not because it harms the body, but because it harms society and the family of the body. Interesting. It's interesting that you bring up cannibalism, Wavy, because the next episode of this lecture series, the next lecture is actually on the topic of cannibalism. But yeah, does anybody, I mean, we can continue, but I am curious, would anybody do it? Would anybody kill, assuming that you get away with it, assuming that there's no legal consequences for you as the doctor to murder these people? Would you be able to like sleep at night? Would you feel like you made the morally righteous decision to kill this innocent person for the sake of the 5 people? I already did get away with it. Okay, well, congratulations. You're both an excellent surgeon and an excellent murderer. You're not really saving 5 people and killing one. It's entirely possible you kill the one, take his organs, and the other 5 people still died. No, okay, so again, like, we have to assume that the reality presented in the theoretical hypothetical situation is true. It's not like a trick question where it's like those people were going to be fine anyway. Like the set of facts that are presented in the hypothetical we are assuming that they are true. So the only reality that we are existing in is one where you can successfully remove these 5 organs from the person and you can successfully transplant them into the 5 patients. I think based on the system that you're brought up in as a doctor would also affect your being able to sleep at night due to malpractice. Yeah. I mean, I suppose, yeah, your personal perspective as a doctor, taking a Hippocratic oath, et cetera, would probably weigh on your conscience. But again, I mean, you also take the Hippocratic Oath to try to help people live. And so, it's sort of a double-edged sword in that way, because as a doctor, you're also supposed to save lives. And in allowing these 5 people to die when presumably there is an option that would save 5 lives while only losing 1, I don't know. I mean, do you factor that in? Does that affect your decision making? All right, we're going to continue the video. You're welcome to keep presenting ideas in the chat, but we're going to see what some of these students have to say.
How many? Put your hands up if you would do it. Anyone in the balcony?
It's a good point, Wavy.
You would? Be careful, don't lean over too much. What? How many wouldn't? All right, what do you say? Speak up in the balcony, you who would yank out the organs. Why?
I'd actually like to explore a slightly alternate possibility of just taking the one of the 5 who needs an organ who dies first, and using their 4 healthy organs to save the other 4.
Whoa, Brainiac.
That's a pretty good idea.
We've got a med student among us.
That's a great idea, except for the fact that you just wrecked the philosophical point.
That's also an interesting question, Alex. I wish they would. That's a completely different class, but I do like that idea.
Things about the way the arguments have begun to unfold. Certain moral principles have already begun to emerge from the discussions we've had. And let's consider what those moral principles look like. The first moral principle that emerged in the discussion said the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, depends on the consequences that will result from your action. At the end of the day, better that 5 should live, even if 1 must die. That's an example of consequentialist moral reasoning. Consequentialist moral reasoning locates morality in the consequences of an act, in the state of the world that will result from the thing you do. But then we went a little further, we considered those other cases, and people weren't so sure about consequentialist moral reasoning. When people hesitated to push the fat man over the bridge, or to yank out the organs of the innocent patient, people gestured toward reasons having to do with the intrinsic quality of the act itself, consequences be what they may. People were reluctant. People thought it was just wrong, categorically wrong, to kill a person, an innocent person, even for the sake of saving 5 lives. At least people thought that in the second version of each story we considered. So this points to a second categorical way of thinking about moral reasoning. Categorical moral reasoning locates morality in certain absolute moral requirements, certain categorical duties and rights, regardless of the consequences.
So I want to pause there because that sort of goes back to what Wavy, or was it Wavy? Yeah, I think Wavy was the one who brought up the part of the Hippocratic Oath that was to do no harm. So that is sort of like the, if you want to just jump back so you can read them, the categorical perspective of moral reasoning, which is that it has more to do with duties and rights. So you're saying basically that despite the consequences of an action, you have a specific duty or a specific right, which again is sort of like a metaphysical idea, not really rooted in anything in real life. It's just sort of an idea that you take an oath, you make a promise, you have a either self-prescribed or externally prescribed duty to do something, and you derive your morality from that, as opposed to consequentialist, which is sort of like the thing that seems, I think to most people, probably the most, like, on its face, like, logical or intuitive, which is just like, save the most people. If you've got an option between 5 people dying or 1 person dying, obviously you pick the 5. But of course, most real life scenarios are not that cut and dry. And so I think, even though it seems like the obvious case, most people probably fall into the categorical side of moral reasoning. And keep going.
Categorical duties and rights, or categorical moral principles. The most influential example of consequential moral reasoning is utilitarianism, a doctrine invented by Jeremy Bentham, the 18th century English political philosopher. The most important philosopher of categorical moral reasoning is the 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant. So we will look at those 2 different modes of moral reasoning, assess them, and also consider others. If you look at the syllabus, you'll notice that we read a number of great and famous books.
I'm going to bring my mic down. Alex, you missed such a saga with the goddamn audio. I cannot bump the video audio up anymore. I'm losing my goddamn mind.
We also
but I can lower my mic.
Take up contemporary political and legal controversies that raise philosophical questions. We will debate equality and inequality, affirmative action, free speech versus hate speech, same-sex marriage, military conscription, a range of practical questions. Why? Not just to enliven these abstract and distant books, but to make clear, to bring out what's at stake in our everyday lives, including our political lives, for philosophy. And so we will read these books, and we will debate these issues.
I love looking at the students in this class. I am so enraptured by the diversity of this undergrad class at Harvard
Here, I have to issue a
in
warning.
2009.
And the warning is this: to read these books in this way, as an exercise in self-knowledge.
That guy in the orange kind of looks like me.
To read them in this way carries certain risks. Risks that are both personal and political. Risks that every student of political philosophy has known. These risks spring from the fact
This is some Hogwarts shit. Yeah, this room is awesome. I would love to take a class in a room that looks like this.
Unsettles us by confronting us with what we
My high school had one room that kind of looked like a tiny version of this called the Hemingway
There's an
room.
irony.
They taught Latin in there,
The
and I
difficulty
just
of this course
really wanted
consists
to.
in the fact that it teaches
Oh,
what
true,
we
what he
already
meant.
know.
But I meant what he said. Oh,
It
yeah, that
works
too.
By taking what we know from familiar,
Look at her.
settings
She is cool.
and making it
Looks
strange.
uncomfortable. It's
That's
a
how
bit
those
stuffy, I
examples
suppose. But it makes
work.
it seems like
The
so
hypotheticals with which we
like
began,
regal.
with their
Like
mix
what you
of
learn in there is
playfulness and
important just by
sobriety.
nature of the
It's
room.
also how these philosophical books work. Philosophy estranges us from the familiar, not by supplying new information, but by inviting and provoking a new way of seeing. But, and here's the risk, once the familiar turns strange, it's never quite the same again. Self-knowledge is like lost innocence.
Yeah, definitely, Alex. And also
However
definitely
unsettling
Wavy.
you find it, it can never be unthought or unknown. What makes this enterprise difficult, but also riveting, is that moral and political philosophy is a story, and you don't know where the story will lead, but what you do know is that the story is about you. Those are the personal risks. Now,
Guy's
what
got
are
a
the
University of
political
Iowa
risks?
hat on at Harvard. Interesting.
One way of introducing a course like this would be to promise you that by reading these books and debating these issues, you will become a better, more responsible citizen. You will examine the presuppositions of public policy. You will hone your political
Yes,
judgment.
Wavy, you're the main
You
character.
will become a more effective participant in public affairs.
Poggers.
But this would be a partial and misleading promise. Political philosophy, for the most part, hasn't worked that way. You have to allow for the possibility that political philosophy may make you a worse citizen rather than a better one, or at least a worse citizen before it makes you a better one. And that's because philosophy is a distancing, even debilitating.
Who do we think this statue is in the background?
And you see this
No
going
idea.
back to Socrates. There's a dialogue, the Gorgias, in which one of Socrates' friends, Callicles, tries to talk him out of
Good theory,
philosophizing.
maybe.
Callicles tells Socrates, philosophy is a pretty toy if one indulges in it with moderation at the right time of life. But if one pursues it further than one should, it is absolute ruin. Take my advice,
love that
Callicles
quote.
says. Abandon argument. Learn the accomplishments of active life. Take for your models not those people who spend their time on these petty quibbles, but those who have a good livelihood and reputation and many other blessings. So Callicles is really saying to Socrates, quit philosophizing, get real, go to business school. And Callicles did have a point. He had a point because philosophy distances us from conventions, from established assumptions.
This part is all just kind of like general, like why is it good and interesting or bad, I guess, and this specific part to study philosophy. The rest of this series is like actually about case studies in morality and justice, but this part's kind of interesting.
Resolve once and for all either the cases or the principles we were arguing when we began. And if Aristotle and Locke and Kant and Mill haven't solved these questions after all of these years, who are we to think that we here in Sanders Theater over the course of a semester can resolve them? And so maybe it's just a matter of each person having his or her own principles and there's nothing more to be said about it. No way of reasoning. That's the evasion of skepticism, to which I would offer the following reply. It's true, these questions have been debated for a very long time. But the very fact that they have recurred and persisted may suggest that though they're impossible in one sense, they're unavoidable in another. And the reason they're unavoidable, the reason they're inescapable, is that we live some answer to these questions every day. So skepticism, just throwing up your hands and giving up on moral reflection, is
Yeah, it's
no
a pretty good
solution.
tie. His suit
Immanuel
is terrible,
Kant
though.
described very well the problem with skepticism when he wrote,
Look how baggy it is.
skepticism is a resting place for human reason, where it can reflect upon its dogmatic wanderings, but it is no dwelling place for permanent
He's just swimming in
settlement.
it.
Simply to acquiesce in skepticism, Kant wrote, can never suffice to overcome the restlessness of reason. I've tried to suggest through these stories and these arguments some sense of the risks and temptations, of the perils and the possibilities. I would simply conclude by saying that the aim of this course is to awaken the restlessness of reason and to see where it might lead. Thank you very much.
All right, another commercial for Palm. I think is in this part. Maybe not. All right, we're gonna skip ahead here.
Like in a situation that desperate, pretty much sacrifice someone.
Okay.
Case for cannibalism. How great is it? I just love this as like a as a thumbnail. Can you imagine? That's really good. But we're gonna skip ahead. That's next time on. Yeah, all the graphics in this are
We started out
great.
last time with some stories, with some moral dilemmas about trolley cars and about doctors and healthy patients
Really, Gorbis?
vulnerable
Which one?
to being victims of organ transplantation. We noticed two things.
Justice is
About
the
the
name of the
arguments
course,
we
but
had.
there may be a book.
One had to do
On
with
it,
the
I'm
way
not
we
sure.
were arguing. We began with our judgments in particular cases, We tried to articulate the reasons or the principles lying behind our judgments.
Yeah, Wavy, that's what Alex was saying.
And then, confronted with a new case, we found ourselves re-examining those principles, revising each in the light of the other.
Yeah, I think that is one of his books, Corbus. Have you read it, or you just have
the
it?
built-in pressure to try to bring into alignment
I've not read any of his stuff.
our judgments about particular cases and the principles we would endorse on reflection.
What'd you think, Corbus?
We also noticed something about the substance of the arguments that emerged from the discussion. We noticed that sometimes we were tempted to locate the morality of an act in the consequences, in the results, in the state of the world that it brought about. And we called this consequentialist moral reason. But we also noticed that in some cases, we weren't swayed only by the result. Sometimes, many of us felt that not just consequences, but also the intrinsic quality or character of the act matters morally. Some people argued that there are certain things that are just categorically wrong, even if they bring about a good result, even if they save 5 people at the cost of 1 life. So we contrasted consequentialist moral principles with categorical ones.
Guy with an incredible shirt in the
Today,
background. Anyone catch that guy?
And in the next few days, we will begin to examine one of the most influential versions of consequentialist moral theory.
There he is again.
And that's the
Impossible
philosophy
to
of
miss.
utilitarianism. Jeremy Bentham, the 18th century English political philosopher, gave the first clear systematic expression to the utilitarian moral theory. And Bentham's idea, his essential idea, is a very simple one, with a lot of morally intuitive appeal. Bentham's idea is the following: the right thing to do, the just thing to do, is to maximize utility. What did he mean by utility? He meant by utility the balance of pleasure over pain, happiness over suffering. Here's how he arrived at the principle of maximizing utility. He started out by observing that all of us, all human beings, are governed by 2 sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. We human beings like pleasure and dislike pain.
Seems pretty straightforward. I
And
love the
so
camera
we embrace
direction in
morality.
this. Like, who is cutting this?
Whether we're thinking about what to do in our own
what's their
lives, or whether
MO?
as legislators or citizens, we're thinking about what the laws should be. The right thing to do, individually or collectively,
That bastard Pain, yeah.
is to
The worst. Hate
act
that
in
guy.
a way that maximizes the overall level of happiness.
Sounds like hedonism.
Bentham's utilitarianism is sometimes summed up with the slogan, the greatest good for the greatest number. With this basic principle of utility on hand, let's begin to test it and to examine it by turning to another case, another story, but this time not a hypothetical story, a real-life story, the case of the Queen versus Dudley and Stevens. This was a 19th century British law case that's famous and much debated in law schools. Here's what happened in the case. I'll summarize the story, then I want to hear how you would rule.
Is that a
imagining
weird statue
you're the
again?
jury.
It's John Harvard.
A newspaper account of the time described the background. A sadder story of disaster at sea was never told than that of the survivors of the yacht Mignonette. The ship foundered in the South Atlantic, 1,300 miles from the Cape. There were 4 in the crew. Dudley was the captain, Stevens was the first mate, Brooks was a sailor, all men of excellent character, or so the newspaper account tells us. The 4th crew member was the cabin boy, Richard Parker, 17 years old. He was an orphan. He had no family, and he was on his first long voyage at sea. He went, the news account tells us, rather against the advice of his friends. He went in the hopefulness of youthful ambition, thinking the journey would make a man of him. Sadly, it was not to be. The facts of the case were not in dispute. A wave hit the ship, and the Mignonette went down. The 4 crew members escaped to a lifeboat. The only food they had
I haven't seen Life of
were
Pi.
2 cans of preserved turnips, no fresh water.
Sounds good. Canned
For the first 3
preserved
days,
turnips.
they ate nothing.
Yum.
On the 4th day, they opened one of the cans of turnips and ate it. The next day, they caught a turtle. Together with the other can of turnips, the turtle enabled them to subsist for the next few days. And then for 8 days, they had nothing. No food, no water. Imagine yourself in a situation like that. What would you do? Here's what they did. By now, the cabin boy, Parker, is lying at the bottom of the lifeboat in the corner because he had drunk seawater against the advice of the others, and he had become ill, and he appeared to be dying. So on the 19th day, Dudley, the captain, suggested that they should all have a lottery, that they should draw lots to see who would die to save the rest. Brooks refused. He didn't like the lottery idea. We don't know whether this was because he didn't want to take the chance or because he believed in categorical moral principles. But in any case,
Later,
no
Gorbis.
lots were drawn. The next day, there was still no ship in sight, so Dudley told Brooks to avert his gaze, and he motioned to Stevens that the boy Parker had better be killed. Dudley offered a prayer. He told the boy his time had come, and he killed him with a penknife, stabbing him in the jugular vein.
Holy shit.
Brooks
What a way to
emerged
go.
from his conscientious objection to share in the gruesome bounty. For 4 days, the 3 of them fed on the body and blood of the cabin boy. True story. And then they were rescued. Dudley describes their rescue in his diary with staggering euphemism, quote, "On the 24th day, as we were having our breakfast,
Jesus.
a ship appeared at last.
I love that phrase. Staggering
3
euphemism.
survivors were picked up by a German ship. They were taken back to Falmouth in England, where they were arrested and tried. Brooks
Dude,
turned
imagine
state's
eating a
witness.
guy
Dudley
that
and
you just were on a
Stevens
boat
went to
with for
trial.
like
They didn't
weeks.
dispute the facts. They claimed they had acted out of necessity. That was their defense. They argued, in effect, better that one should die so that 3 could survive. The prosecutor
What's up, Anton
wasn't
Empire?
swayed by that argument. He said murder is murder.
You're just in
so the
time for
case
the
went to
cannibalism
trial.
talk.
Now imagine you are the jury. And just to simplify the discussion, put aside the question of law, and let's assume that you as the jury are charged with deciding whether what they did was morally permissible or not. How many would vote not guilty, that what they did was
Chat.
morally permissible?
What do you think? You're the jury. Cool to eat the guy or not cool to eat the guy? I'm not
And
going to
how
pull up a
many
poll.
would
I'm too
vote
lazy.
guilty? What they did was morally wrong. A pretty sizable majority. Now let's see what people's reasons are, and let me begin with those who are in the
Deontologist. I don't
minority.
know if I've
Let's hear
heard
first from
that
the
term,
defense
Anton.
of Dudley and Stevens. Why would you morally exonerate
Honestly,
them?
don't know.
What are your reasons? Yes.
I think it is morally reprehensible, but I think that there's a distinction between what's morally reprehensible and what makes someone legally accountable. In other words, as the judge said, what's always
This kid's a
moral isn't
Republican,
necessarily against
guaranteed.
the law. And while I don't think that necessity justifies theft or murder or any illegal act, at some point your degree of necessity does in fact exonerate you from any guilt.
Okay, good. Other defenders, other voices for the defense. Moral justifications for what they did. Yes.
All right, thank you. I just feel like in a situation that desperate, you have to do what you have to do to survive.
You have to do what you have to do.
You got to do what you got to do, pretty much. If you've been going 19 days without any food, someone just has to take the sacrifice. Someone has to make the sacrifice, and people can survive. Right. And furthermore, from that, let's say they survive and then they become productive members of society who go
Anton, the situation was a group of like 4 British sailors, 19th century, lost at sea for many days after a storm. The cabin boy got sick, and they had no food, and so they decided to kill the cabin boy and eat him. And then they were saved like a few days later.
That's true too. That's fair.
And they're debating whether or not it was morally righteous to cannibalize the cabin boy.
Marcus, all right. We've heard a defense, a couple of voices for the defense. Now we need to hear from the prosecution. Most people think what they did was wrong. Why? Yes.
One of the first things that I was thinking was, if they haven't been eating for a really long time, maybe they're mentally affected, and so then that could be used as a defense, a possible argument that they weren't in the proper state of mind, they weren't making decisions they might otherwise be making. And if that's an appealing argument, that you have to be in an altered mindset to do something like that, it suggests that people who find that argument convincing do think that they were acting immorally.
But I want to know what you think. You defend them. You vote to convict, right?
Yeah, I don't think that they acted in a morally appropriate way.
And why not? What do you say? Here's Marcus. He just defended them. He said, you heard what he said.
Yes. Yes.
That you've got to do what you've got to do in a case like that.
Yeah.
What do you say to Marcus?
You say you got to do what you got to do
there's no situation
morally too,
that would allow
and
human
it's fine that you ate that guy, but now you go to jail.
The idea of fate or that the other people's lives in their own hands, that we don't have that kind of power.
Good. Okay. Thank you. And what's your name?
Britt.
Britt?
Yes.
Okay. Who else? What do you say? Stand up.
I'm wondering if Dudley and Stephen had asked.
Yeah, Anton, the guy wasn't dead though. They killed him to eat him.
Dying. If that would,
They stabbed him in the neck with a penknife.
Would that exonerate them from an act of murder? And if so, is that still morally justified?
But they thought he was probably going to die because he drank seawater, but technically he wasn't dead yet.
Kathleen.
And they were all kind of dying.
What would that scenario look
Yeah,
like?
sorry, that context definitely changes
Dudley
things.
is there, penknife in hand, but instead of the prayer, or before the prayer, he says, Parker, would you mind? We're desperately hungry, as Marcus empathizes with. We're desperately hungry. You're not going to last long anyhow.
Yeah. You can be a martyr.
Would you be a martyr? How about it, Parker? Then what do you think? Would it be morally justified then? Suppose Parker, in his semi-stupor, says, okay.
I don't think it would be morally justifiable, but I'm wondering.
Even then it wouldn't be.
No.
You don't think that even with consent, it would be morally justifiable?
Now we're getting into a argument of consent.
Want to take up Kathleen's consent
Going back to what that girl was talking about.
That would make it morally justified.
Yeah, but what about what that girl said about they've been lost at sea for multiple days? They're delirious. Can you consent to sex when you're drunk? Can you consent to being eaten when you're lost at sea for 6 days without food?
Why would it? Yes.
Well, I just think that if he was making his own original idea and it was his idea to start with, then that would be the only situation in which I would see it being appropriate in any way. Because that way you couldn't make the argument that he was
persuaded.
Pressured. You know, it's
Yeah.
3-1 or whatever the ratio was.
Right.
And I think that if he was making a decision to give his life, then he took on the agency to sacrifice himself, which some people might see as admirable, and other people might disagree with that decision.
So if he came up with the idea, that's the only kind of
All right,
consent
Wavy,
we
take
can have
care.
confidence in morally, then it would be okay. Otherwise, it would be kind of coerced consent under the circumstances, you think. Is there anyone who thinks that even the consent of Parker would not justify their killing him? Who thinks that? Yes, tell us why. Stand up.
I think that Parker would be killed with the hope that the other crew members would be rescued. So there's no definite reason that he should be killed because you don't know when they're going to get rescued. So if you kill him, it's killing him in vain. Do you keep killing a crew member until you're rescued and then you're left with no one? Because someone's going to die eventually.
Well, the moral logic of the situation seems to be that they would keep on picking off the weakest, maybe, one by one, until they were rescued. And in this case, luckily, they were rescued when 3 at least were still alive. Now, if Parker did give his consent, would it be all right, do you think, or not?
No.
No.
It still wouldn't be right.
And tell us why it wouldn't be all right.
First of all, cannibalism, I believe, is morally incorrect. So you shouldn't be eating a human anyway.
So you...
On its face, he shouldn't be eating human anyway. I like that argument.
So then, even on the scenario of waiting until someone died, still it would be objectionable.
Yes, to me personally. I feel like it all depends on one's personal morals, and like we can't sit here and just, like, this is just my opinion. Of course,
Yeah, the 11th commandment,
Well,
thou shalt
let's
not
see what
eat
their
dude.
disagreements are, and then we'll see if they have reasons that can persuade you or not. Let's try that. All right, let's, now, is there someone who can explain, those of you who are tempted by consent, can you explain why consent makes such a moral difference? What about the lottery idea? Does that count?
I wonder if this consent argument would be any different if this were filmed this year as opposed to in
They had
2009.
agreed to a lottery, then how many would then say it was all right? Suppose there were a lottery, cabin boy lost, and the rest of the story unfolded. Then how many people would say it was morally permissible? So the numbers are rising if we had a lottery. Let's hear from one of you for whom the lottery would make a moral difference. Why would it?
I think the essential element in my mind that makes it a crime is the idea that they decided at some
This
point
guy
that
looks
their
awesome.
lives were more important than his, and that, I mean, that's kind of the basis for really any crime, right? It's like my needs, my desires are more important than yours, and mine take precedent. And if they had done a lottery where everyone consented that someone should die, and it's sort of like they're all sacrificing themselves to save the rest.
Then it would be all right.
A little grotesque, but
morally permissible?
yes.
And what's your name?
Matt.
So, Matt, for you, what bothers you is not the cannibalism, but the lack of due process.
I guess you could say that.
Right? And can someone who agrees with Matt say a little bit more about why a lottery would make it, in your view, morally
Going to
permissible?
jail, Matt. Lock him up.
The way I understood it originally was that was the whole issue, is that the cabin boy was never consulted about whether or not something was going to happen to him, even with the original lottery, whether or not he would be a part of that. It was just decided that he was the one that was going to die.
Right, that's what happened in the actual case.
Right.
But if there were a lottery and they'd all agreed to the procedure, you think that would be okay?
Right, because then everyone knows that there's going to be a death. Whereas, you know, the cabin boy didn't know that this discussion was even happening. There was no, you know, forewarning.
Due process, quite a
for him to
concept
know
lost
that,
in
hey,
today's
I
world.
may be the one that's dying.
All right, now suppose everyone agrees to the lottery, they have the lottery, the cabin boy loses, and he changes his mind.
You've already decided. It's like a verbal contract. You can't go back on that.
I mean,
You've
this is
decided
due
the
process in
decision
the
was
context
made.
of four guys
You know,
in a
if you know
boat.
that you're dying for the,
not
you know, the reason
in a-
for others to live, you would, if someone
know,
else had died,
in
you
a
know that you would
courtroom.
consume them. So
You could argue that there's due process
Right.
in the
But
court
I-
of
but then
public
you could say,
opinion,
I know,
in the
but I
boat with four
lost.
guys, in the court of
I
law.
think that that's the whole moral issue.
Got
is that there
varying
was no
degrees of due
consulting
process.
of the cabin boy, and that's what makes it the most horrible. Is that he had no idea what was even going on. That had he known what was going on, it would
Yeah, that'd be great.
be a bit more understandable.
All right, good. Now I
What a
wanna
reveal
hear-
at the
so
end if he
there are
was
some
like,
who think
and I ate that guy.
it's morally permissible, but only
So
about
what do you think of
20%,
me, hot shots?
led by
And I'll
Marx.
eat all of you and
Then
lock the
there are some who
doors.
say the real problem here is the lack of consent. Whether the lack of consent to a lottery, to a fair procedure, or Kathleen's idea, lack of consent at the moment of death. And if we add consent, then more people are willing to consider the sacrifice morally justified. I want to hear now, finally, from those of you who think even with consent, even with a lottery, even with a final murmur of consent by Parker at the very last moment, it would still be wrong. And why would it be wrong? That's what I want to hear. Yes.
Well, the whole time I've been leaning all towards the categorical moral reasoning, and I think that there's a possibility I'd be okay with the idea of
Kappa
the
Mardi
lottery
Gras
and then the loser
2005.
taking into their own hands to
I'm
kill
fascinated by the
themselves,
clothes that all these students wear.
so that there wouldn't be, you know, an act of murder. But I still think that even that way, it's coerced. And also, I don't think that there's any remorse. Like in Dudley's diary, we were eating our breakfast. It seems as though he's just sort of like, you know, the whole idea of not valuing someone else's life. So that makes me feel like I have to take the
You
categorical
want to throw the
stand.
book at him when he lacks remorse or a sense of having done anything wrong.
Right.
So, all right, good. Any other defenders of who say it's just categorically wrong, with or without consent? Yes, stand up. Why?
I think undoubtedly the way
It's
our
valuing
society
his life
sees
as
murder is
breakfast.
murder. Murder is murder, and in every way, and our society looks at murder down on it in the same light, and I don't think it's any different in any case.
Good. Let me ask you a question. There were 3 lives at stake versus 1.
Okay.
The one, the cabin boy, he had no family, he had no dependents. These other 3 had families back home in England. They had dependents. They had wives and children. Think back to Bentham. Bentham says we have to consider the welfare, the utility, the happiness of everybody. We have to add it all up. So it's not just numbers 3 against 1. It's also all of those people at home.
Anton, you missed it. We literally did the trolley. The trolley problem was the very first thing that we did.
Sympathize with them, Dudley and Stevens. And the paper said if they weren't motivated by affection and concern for their loved ones at home and their dependents, surely they wouldn't have done this.
Yeah, and how is that any different from people on the corner trying to have the same desire to feed their family? I don't think it's any different. I think in any case, if I'm murdering you to advance my status, that's murder, and I think that we should look at that all in the same light instead of criminalizing certain activities and making certain things seem more violent and savage. When in the same case, it's all the same. It's all the same act and mentality that goes into murder, necessity to feed your family. So
I admire this kid's conviction. I feel like everybody else has been pussyfooting around their opinion, trying to like suss out what the right answer is, and this guy has some actual conviction.
3,000. Suppose the stakes are even bigger.
Suppose the stakes are even bigger. I think it's still the same deal.
Kill the
Do you
professor.
think Bentham is wrong to say the right thing to do is to add up the collective happiness? You think he's wrong about that?
I don't think he's wrong, but I think murder is murder in any case.
Yeah, well, then Bentham has to be wrong. If you're right, he's wrong.
Okay, then he's wrong.
All right.
Right.
Thank you.
Hell yeah, he's wrong. Fuck Bentham.
All right, let's step back from this discussion and notice how many objections have we heard to what they did. We heard some defenses of what they did. The defenses had to do with necessity, their dire circumstance, and, implicitly at least, the idea that numbers matter. And not only numbers matter, but the wider effects matter. Their families back home, their dependents. Parker was an orphan. No one would miss him. So if you add up, if you try to calculate the balance of happiness and suffering, you might have a case for saying what they did was the right thing. Then we heard at least 3 different types of objections.
This guy hates orphans.
We heard an objection
Yeah,
that
well,
said what they did
if
was
we're-
categorically wrong, Mike, here at the end.
If you're trying to measure
Categorically wrong.
objective
Murder is murder, it's always wrong,
happiness,
even
you know,
if it increases
they don't have
the
ties to
overall
other people.
of society.
Sorry.
A categorical
Welcome
objection.
back, Wavy.
But we still need to investigate why
We're still talking about
is
cannibalism.
categorically wrong.
Kind of. Actually, we're sort of moving on.
Is it because
We're talking about murder
even
more broadly now.
cannibals have certain fundamental rights? And if that's the reason, where do those rights come from, if not from some idea of the larger welfare or utility or happiness? Question number 1. Others said a lottery would make a difference. A fair procedure, Matt said. And some people were swayed by that. That's not a categorical objection exactly. It's saying everybody has to be counted as an equal, even though at the end of the day, one can be sacrificed.
Yes, sort of,
for the
Wavy.
general welfare. That leaves us with another question to
He's not really arguing
Why
anything. He's
does
just kind of
agreement
laying
to a
out
certain
specific
even a fair
or different types of arguments.
justify whatever result flows from the operation of that
But yeah,
procedure?
that is one that he is describing now.
Question number 2. And question number 3, the basic idea of consent. Kathleen got us onto this. If the cabin boy had agreed himself and not under duress, as was added, then it would be all right to take his life to save the rest. And even more people signed on to that idea. But that raises a third philosophical question. What is the moral work that consent does? Why does an act of consent make such a moral difference that an act that would be wrong, taking a life without consent, is morally permissible with consent? To investigate those 3 questions, we're going to have to read some
Very
philosophers.
Rawlsian perspective,
And starting
Wavy.
next time, we're going to read Bentham and John Stuart Mill, Utilitarian philosophers.
Don't miss the chance.
Well, folks, that's the end of Ep 1. Trying to decide if I want to do the second one or not. I think I might call it there and just do another one of these next week. We have, I don't know, there's 12 of them. They're each an hour long. I'm right on the line of wanting to start up the second one. But I don't know. What do you guys think? You want to do another one? Yeah, great pilot. Yeah, picked up for a full season. Keep going. You want to do one more? I probably have one more in me. Yeah, we can go on to the next one. These are all on YouTube for free, by the way. Obviously, you're looking at YouTube right now. It's right here. Yeah, this is good stuff. And I'm going to be trying to do this like kind of regularly every Friday. There's 12 of these, I'm pretty sure. They're an hour long, so we're not going to do them all today. I might do one more. Adam Man, welcome. You're just in time. All right, we'll do the second one. We'll do one more. That one was Moral Side of Murder. If you're just tuning in, this is Harvard Lecture Series. The title of the course is Justice. It's taught by This guy, Michael Sandell, we kind of covered his wiki earlier. He's a professor at Harvard. He's a political philosopher. He worked in the Bush administration as the president's counsel to bioethics, or on bioethics, which not super one. Let's click it actually. Let's see what this kind of person does. The President's Council on Bioethics was a group of individuals appointed by the United States President George W. Bush to advise his administration on bioethics. Established on November 28, 2001 by Executive Order 13237, the Council was directed to advise the President on bioethical issues that may emerge as a consequence of the advances of biomedical science and technology. It succeeded and largely replaced the National Bioethics Advisory Commission appointed by Clinton, which expired in 2001. It looks like it was in 2009, Obama informed members of the council that their services were no longer needed. Through a spokesperson, Obama made clear that he intended to replace the committee with a body that offers practical policy options rather than philosophical guidance. Interesting. Executive Order 13521 of November 24, 2009 superseded the previous council by establishing the Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues. On November 25, 2009, Obama named Amy Gutmann, the president of the University of Pennsylvania, to chair his new advisory panel on bioethics, and James Wagner, the president of Emory, was appointed as vice chairperson. So, there you go. Pretty interesting. We're not going to get too deep into that. I knew I loved Bush for a reason. Yeah. Skip to criticism. Oh, the criticism of Sandell. I don't think he has a criticism section. Oh, there's criticism. Oh, criticism of the commission. Yeah, we can read that. Critics have questioned the motives and goals behind the PCBE. Elizabeth Blackburn, who was dismissed from the commission, co-authored an article citing examples published by other members suggesting that it was set up to justify President Bush's position on stem cell research and abortion, writing, "Our concern is that some of their contents may have ended up distorting the potential of biomedical research and the motivation of some of its researchers." Bioethicist Leslie Metzler accused the council of wrapping political and religious agendas in a guise of dignity and described them as largely Christian-affiliated neoconservatives, philosophers, and political scientists rather than bench scientists. Interesting. Metzler said the council members mischaracterized the positions of their opponents and used invective rather than what? I don't know what that word means. Invective. Anybody know what that word means? I don't think I've seen that word before. Insulting, abusive, or highly critical. Rather than addressing the merits of their argument. So it's essentially ad hominem, I guess. The response to President Obama's decision to disband the council drew both criticism and praise. Colleen Carroll Campbell, the former speechwriter for President Bush and member of the conservative advocacy group Ethics and Public Policy Center, predicted that Obama's desires to see his policy backed by expert consensus more likely will be realized with the new commission composed of like-minded political liberals seeped into utilitarianism than with the brainy, diverse, and unpredictable crew that populated the now defunct council. In contrast, Jacob Appel of New York's Mount Sinai Hospital wrote that the panel itself, far from being an incubator of intellectual ferment, had evolved into a publicly funded right-wing think tank with a handful of token moderates for window dressing. They argued that Obama was wise to scrap the entire panel and start over. So, there you go. Anyone know why conservatives don't like stem cell research? Seems like a kind of apolitical issue. Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty interesting, though. It's related to abortion, at least for embryonic stem cells. Oh, yeah, okay, I guess that makes sense. Like, you need to get the stem cells from somewhere. So it's like if you want to harm fetuses or whatever to get, or embryos, if you believe life, starts at conception or whatever, then it's probably more difficult to acquire stem cells. That is my completely uninformed opinion. But there you have it. So we're going to move on because this next one is an hour long. I'm basically correct. That's the best kind of correct. All right, here we go. We are going to start episode 2. We definitely want to watch that Palm ad, so I'm going to start it right basically from the beginning. In association with Harvard,
This program is provided by
drink Palm.
additional funding provided by
Just think it's so funny. This is funded by Palm. Like who at Palm was like, yo, you know who we need to partner with? Oh fuck, I think that was my mirror in my bathroom that just fell. It broke. Should I go check on that? Yeah. Pause. I'll be right back. I think the mirror in my shower just shattered. Alright, not as bad as I thought. It was just like this plastic part that broke, which I don't really need. This mirror sucks. It suctions for like 2 hours, so like you can stick it to the wall. I shave in the shower, so I stick it to the wall to shave, but then if you forget, it will just like an hour and a half later just fall off the fucking wall and break. And it's happened like 4 or 5 times. But the mirror part is fine. It's just like this shitty plastic rim. It's also supposed to be non-fog, and it does not non-fog. It does fog. Anyway, let me close this all the way. Okay, we're back. I sound so defeated. Yeah, I'm fucking pissed, dude. We're back. We're back. We got one more app. And done. The Automod doesn't want you to say that word, and I don't have really strong feelings one way or another, but I'm too lazy to allow it. So, we're going to. Thank you, Wavy. Thank you. All right, so we are going to start now with episode 2, putting a price tag on life. This is a good one.
Last time,
Previously on
argued
Justice.
about the case of the Queen versus Dudley and Stevens, the lifeboat case, the case of cannibalism at sea.
We talked about cannibalism.
And with the arguments about the lifeboat in mind, the arguments for and against what Dudley and Stevens did in mind, let's turn back to the philosophy, the utilitarian philosophy of Jeremy Bentham. Bentham was born in
Look
England
at that
in
hottie.
1848. At the age of 12,
It's crazy how just
he went to
everybody looked
Oxford.
like
At
that.
15, he went to law school. He was admitted to the bar at age 19, but he never practiced
Popped collar,
law.
popped
Instead, he devoted
lime
his
green,
life
popped collar,
jurisprudence
lime
and
green
moral
polo shirt is such a look for a undergrad
Last time we
student
began
at
to
Harvard.
consider Bentham's version of utilitarianism. The main idea is simply stated, and it's this. The highest principle of morality.
Nobody made that argument,
whether
surprisingly,
personal or
Wavy.
Political morality is
Appeal to the senses, appeal to the taste buds.
the general welfare, or the collective happiness, or the overall balance of pleasure over pain. In a phrase, maximize utility.
Look at the lack of MacBooks in here. One MacBook in this shot.
Principle
2.
by the following line of reasoning.
Look at that one guy who's like
All
50 years
governed by
old
pain
in a
and
sea
pleasure.
of,
They are
of
our
like
sovereign
19-year-olds.
masters, and so any moral system has to take account of them. How best to take account? By maximizing.
That's cool.
And this
I like
leads
that
to
guy.
the principle of the greatest good for the greatest number. What exactly should we maximize? Bentham tells us happiness, or more precisely, utility. Maximizing utility is a principle not only for individuals, but also
That's
for
fucked,
communities
Aiden.
and for legislators. What, after all, is a community? Bentham asks. It's the sum of the individuals who comprise it. And that's why, in deciding the best policy, in deciding what the law should be, in deciding what's just, citizens and legislators should ask themselves the question, if we add up all of the benefits of this policy and subtract all of the costs, the right thing to do is the one that maximizes the balance of happiness over suffering. That's what it means to maximize utility. Now, today, I want to see whether you agree or disagree with it. And it often goes, this utilitarian logic, under the name of cost-benefit analysis, which is used by companies and by governments all the time. And what it involves is placing a value, usually a dollar value, to stand for utility, on the costs and the benefits of various proposals. Recently in the Czech Republic, there was a proposal to increase the excise tax on smoking. Philip Morris, the tobacco company, does huge business in the Czech Republic. They commissioned a study, a cost-benefit analysis of smoking in the Czech Republic. And what their cost-benefit analysis found was the government gains by having Czech citizens smoke.
Shocker.
How do they gain?
Shocker that their study would find that.
There are negative effects to the public finance of the Czech government because there are increased healthcare costs for people who develop smoking-related diseases. On the other hand, there were positive effects, and those were added up. On the other side,
That everybody looks cool because they're smoking
positive
cigarettes.
effects included, for the most part, various tax revenues that the government derives from the sale of cigarette products, but it also included healthcare savings to the government when people die early, pension savings, you don't have to pay pensions for as long, and also savings in housing costs for the elderly.
Because they're dead?
When all of the costs and benefits were added up, the Philip Morris study found that there is a net public finance gain in the Czech Republic of $147 million.
Now that's just
And
math.
the savings in housing and health care and pension costs, the government enjoys a savings of over $1,200 for each person who dies prematurely due to smoking. Cost-benefit analysis.
Can't argue with that.
Now, those among you who are defenders of utilitarianism may think that this is an unfair test. Philip Morris was pilloried in the press, and they issued an apology for this heartless calculation. You may say that what's missing here is something that the utilitarian can easily incorporate, namely, the value to the person and to the families of those who die from lung cancer. What about the value of life? Some cost-benefit analyses incorporate a measure for the value of life. One of the most famous of these involved the Ford Pinto case. Did any of you read about that? This was back in the 1970s. Do you remember what the Ford Pinto was, a kind of car?
A kind of car.
It was a small car, a subcompact car, very popular. But it had one problem, which is the fuel tank was at the back of the car. And in rear collisions, the fuel tank exploded. And some people were killed, and some severely injured. Victims of these injuries took Ford to court to sue. And in the court case, it turned out that Ford had long since known about the vulnerable fuel tank and had done a cost-benefit analysis to determine whether it would be worth it to put in a special shield that would protect the fuel tank and prevent it from exploding. They did a cost-benefit analysis. The cost per part to increase the safety of the Pinto they calculated at $11 per part.
Steep.
And this was the cost-benefit analysis that emerged in the trial. $11 per part at 12.5 million cars and trucks came to a total cost of $137 million to improve the safety. But then they calculated the benefits of spending all this money on a safer car. And they counted 180 deaths, and they assigned a dollar value, $200,000 per death. 180 injuries, 67,000. And then the cost to repair, the replacement cost for 2,000 vehicles that would be destroyed without the safety device, $700 per vehicle. So the benefits turned out to be only $49.5 million.
I think that's right, Anton.
So they didn't install the device. Needless to say, when this memo of the Ford Motor Company's cost-benefit analysis came out in the trial, it appalled the jurors who awarded.
They did not account for the cost of that study being made public in the equation.
An idea of calculating, because Ford included a measure of the value of life. Now, who here wants to
Yeah, we do this with healthcare. We do this with basically every type of
analysis
insurance.
From this apparent counterexample, who has a defense?
Legacy, you're in a
Or do you think this completely
ethics
destroys
and philosophy class at Harvard, but we're doing math right now.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think that once again they've made the same mistake the previous case did.
Look at these
They
two
assigned
old
a dollar
guys. Who are
value
they? How did
to
they get
human
into this
life, and
undergrad
once
class?
again, they failed to take account things like
I love
suffering and
them.
emotional losses by the families. I mean, families lost earnings, but they also lost a loved one, and that is more valued than $200,000.
Right. And wait. That's good. What's your name?
Julia Roto.
So if 200,000, Julie, is too low a figure because it doesn't include the loss of a loved one and the loss of those years of
Yes,
life,
I'm the dating show guy.
what do you think
This is my other
would be a
show.
more accurate number?
I don't believe I could give a number. I think that this sort of analysis shouldn't be applied to issues of human life. I think it can't be used monetarily.
So they didn't just put too low a number, Julie says. They were wrong to try to put any number at all. All right, let's hear someone who you have to adjust for inflation.
Big pop in the Harvard room for the just for inflation joke.
Now? This was 35 years ago. $2 million.
Yeah, he's really not wrong.
You would put $2 million. And what's your name? Wojtek says, we have to allow for inflation. We should be more generous. Then would you be satisfied that this is the right way of thinking about the question?
I guess, unfortunately, it is for.
Wojtek? Yeah,
There
it's an
needs to
interesting
be a
name.
number
I'm not
put
sure.
somewhere.
I'm not sure what
I'm not sure what that number would be, but I do agree that there could possibly
nationality that would be.
A number put on human life.
All right, so Wojtek says, and here he disagrees with Julie. Julie says we can't put
It's a
a
cool
number
name,
on
though.
human
I like the
life
name.
for the purpose of a
Wojtek.
cost-benefit analysis. Wojtek says we have to, because we have to make decisions somehow. What do other people think about this? Is there anyone prepared to defend cost-benefit analysis here as accurate, as desirable? Yes? Go ahead.
I think that if Ford and other car companies didn't use cost-benefit analysis, they'd eventually go out of business because they wouldn't be able to be profitable, and millions of people wouldn't be able to use their cars to get to jobs, to put food on the table, to feed their children. So I think that if cost-benefit analysis isn't employed, the greater good is sacrificed.
Gotta have cars.
All right, what's your name?
You gotta have
Raul.
cars.
There was recently a study done about cell phone use by drivers when people are driving a car, and there's a debate whether that should be banned. And The figure was that some 2,000 people die as a result of accidents each year using
Yeah, this one is particularly number-heavy legacy. The last one was cool. It was all about cannibalism.
The Center for Risk Analysis at Harvard found that if you look at the benefits of the cell phone use and you put some value on the life, it comes out about the same because of the enormous economic benefit of enabling people to take advantage of their time, not waste time, be able to make deals and talk to friends and so on while they're driving. Doesn't that suggest that it's a mistake to try to put monetary figures on questions of human life?
Well, I think that if the great majority of people try to derive maximum utility out of a service like using cell phones and the convenience that cell phones provide, that sacrifice is necessary for satisfaction to occur.
You're an outright utilitarian.
Yes. Okay.
All right, then one last question, Raul.
Okay.
And I put this to Wojtek. What dollar figure should be put on human life to decide whether to ban the use of cell phones?
Well, I don't want to arbitrarily calculate a figure. I mean, right now, I think that...
You want to take it under advisement?
Yeah, I'll take it under advisement.
But what, roughly speaking, would it be? You've got 2,300 deaths.
Okay.
You've got to assign a dollar value to know whether you want to prevent those deaths by banning the use of cell phones in cars.
Okay.
So, what would your hunch be? How much? $1 million? $2 million? $2 million was Wojtek's figure.
Yeah.
Best I could do is 350.
Maybe $1 million.
$1 million?
Yeah.
Low ball.
You know, that's
million.
Good. Thank you. So these are some of the controversies that arise these days from cost-benefit analysis, especially those that involve placing a dollar value on everything to be added up. Well, now I want to turn to your objections, not necessarily to cost-benefit analysis specifically, because that's just one version of the utilitarian logic in practice today, but to the theory as a whole, to the idea that the right thing to do, the just basis for policy and law, is to maximize.
Yeah, Wavy, I think it's useful for like production metrics, like when you're talking about like making cars and stuff. You know, like that the example with the Ford Pinto, where it's like it costs a certain amount of money to make certain car parts, but with other things like the convenience of a cell phone, yeah, I agree. It's like more abstract.
So let's hear from the critics. Yes.
My main issue with it is that I feel like you can't say that just because someone's in the minority, what they want and need is less valuable than someone who's in the majority. So I guess I have an issue with the idea that the greatest good for the greatest number is okay, because there's still, what about people who are in the lesser number? Like, it's not fair to them. They didn't have any say in where they wanted to be.
All right, that's an interesting objection. You're worried about the effect on the minority.
Yes.
What's your name, by the way?
Anna.
It's an interesting take, Ricky Sanchez.
Anna's worry about the effect on the minority. What do you say to Anna?
She said that the minorities value less. I don't think that's the case, because individually...
Motivation to do what?
Just the same as the individual of the majority. It's just that the numbers outweigh the minority. And I mean, at a certain point, you have to make a decision. And I'm sorry for the minority, but sometimes it's for the greater good.
For the greater good. Anna, what do you say? What's your name?
Yangda.
What do you say to Yangda? Yangda says you just have to add up people's preferences, and those in the minority do have their preferences weighed. Can you give an example of the kind of thing you're worried about when you say you're worried about utilitarianism violating the concern or respect due the minority?
Okay.
Can you give an example?
So, well, with any of the cases that we've talked about, like for the shipwreck one, I think the boy who was eaten still had as much of a right to live as the other people, and just because he was the
minority in that case, the one who maybe had less of a chance to keep living.
I wonder what this girl's
that
take
doesn't
on
mean
democracy is.
That the others automatically have a right to eat him just because it would give a greater amount of people the chance to live.
So there may be certain rights that the minority members have, that the individual has, that shouldn't be traded off for the sake of utility? Yes. Yes, Anna? This would be a test for you.
It's a good question, Aiden.
Back in ancient Rome, they threw Christians to the lions in the Colosseum for sport. If you think how the utilitarian calculus would go, yes, the Christian thrown to the lion suffers enormous, excruciating pain. But look at the collective ecstasy of the Romans.
Bring back the Colosseum.
Well, in that time, I don't, if, in modern day of time, to value to give a number to the happiness given to the people watching, I don't think any policymaker would say the pain of one person, of the suffering of one person is much, in comparison to the happiness gained.
No, but you have to admit that if there were enough Romans delirious enough with happiness, it would outweigh even the most excruciating pain of a handful of Christians thrown to the lion. So we really have here two different objections to utilitarianism. One has to do with whether utilitarianism adequately respects individual rights or minority rights, and the other has to do with the whole idea of aggregating utility or preferences or values. Is it possible to aggregate all values, to translate them into dollar terms? There was, in the 1930s, a psychologist who tried to address this second question. He tried to prove what utilitarianism assumes, that it is possible to translate all goods, all values, all human concerns into a single uniform measure. And he did this by conducting a survey of young recipients of relief. This was in the 1930s. And he gave them a list of unpleasant experiences. And he asked them, how much would you have to be paid to undergo the following experiences? And he kept track. For example, how much would you have to be paid to have one upper front tooth pulled out? Or how much would you have to be paid to have one little toe cut off? Or
I would have a little
to eat
toe cut off
earthworm
for
6 inches long. Or to live the rest
$10,000
of your life on a farm
maybe?
in
No,
Kansas.
more than that. $80,000 to lose one
Or
toe.
to choke a stray cat to death with your bare hands. Now, what do you suppose was the most expensive?
To eat an
item on
earthworm,
that
I would do
list?
that for $5.
Kansas?
Not even. $3.
You're right, it was Kansas. For
$100K for a toe, Aiden?
Kansas, people said they'd have to pay them, they'd have to be paid $300,000.
To go live in Kansas.
What do you think was the next most expensive? Not the cat. Not
Hi,
the
Tay. Welcome.
Not the toe.
We're talking about how much money you'd have to pay to eat a worm and how that relates to moral philosophy.
People said you'd have to pay them $100,000
What?
to eat the worm.
That's insane.
What do you
Who
think was
said
the
that?
least expensive item?
Tay, how much would someone have to pay to
Not the
eat a
cat.
worm?
The tooth. During the Depression, people were willing to have their tooth pulled for only $4,500. Now, here's what Thorndike concluded.
No
from this
amount,
study.
Aiden? Never?
Any want or satisfaction which exists.
I said $3
exists
for
in
a
some
worm.
amount and is therefore measurable. The
One
life
worm.
of a dog or a cat or a chicken.
That's what I'm saying, Tay.
consists of appetites.
They're mostly
cravings,
just dirt, I
desires,
feel
and
like,
their
and just like
So does the life
goop.
of human beings.
Not a
though
big
the
deal.
appetites and desires are more
You could swallow it
complicated.
whole. Not vegan. Yeah, I suppose
But
that's true.
What about Thorndike's study? Does it
I feel like
support
you can get sick from eating just about anything if you eat enough of them, but one worm, I feel like you'd be totally
all
fine.
values can be captured according to a single uniform measure of value? Or does the preposterous character of those different items on the list suggest the opposite conclusion, that maybe, whether we're talking about life or Kansas or the worm, maybe the things we value and cherish can't be captured according to a single uniform measure of value? And if they can't, what are the consequences for the utilitarian
It's a good
theory
point, Wavy.
of morality? That's a question we'll continue with next time.
Commercial break. Everybody drink your palm. How to measure pleasure. Ooh.
Last time we began to consider some objections to Jeremy Bentham's version of utilitarianism. People raised two objections in the discussion we had. The first was the objection, the claim, that utilitarianism, by concerning itself with the greatest good for the greatest number, fails adequately to respect individual rights. Today we have debates about torture and terrorism. Suppose a suspected terrorist was apprehended on September 10th, and you had reason to believe that the suspect had crucial information about an impending terrorist attack that would kill over 3,000 people, and you couldn't extract the information. Would it be just to torture the suspect to get the information? Or do you say no?
Torture doesn't work.
There is a categorical moral duty of respect for individual rights. In a way, we're back to the questions
We all
started
know
with
this now.
about
But I feel like
Trolley
this
Car
was
Problem.
not common
So that's
knowledge
the first
until
issue.
recently. Did anyone watch that movie with
Considered some
Adam Driver?
examples of cost-benefit
It's pretty good.
analysis.
I forget what it was called.
But a lot of people were unhappy with cost-benefit analysis.
The one where he's like the guy who's trying to
when it came
expose
to
the
placing a dollar value on
documents
human life.
from Guantanamo. What was that movie
So
called?
that
Does
led
anybody
us to
know?
the second objection.
It had a bad
The
name that was
question
not
whether it's
memorable,
possible to
obviously, since I
translate
don't
all
remember it.
values into a single uniform measure of value. It asks, in other words, whether all values are commensurable. Let me give you one other example of an experience. This actually
The
is a
report.
true
Thank
story.
you,
It comes
Anton.
from
Yeah.
personal experience.
Yeah. It was
That raises
pretty good
a
and fine
question,
movie.
at least, about whether all values can be translated without loss into utilitarian terms. Some years ago, when I was a graduate student, I was at Oxford in England, and they had men's and women's colleges. They weren't yet mixed. And the women's colleges had rules against overnight male guests.
Bye, Aiden.
By the 1970s, these rules were rarely enforced and easily violated, or so I was told. By the late 1970s, when I was there, pressure grew to relax these rules, and it became the subject of debate among the faculty at St. Anne's College, which was one of these all-women's colleges. The older women on the faculty were traditionalists. They were opposed to change on conventional moral grounds. But times have changed, and they were embarrassed to give the true grounds for their objection. And so they translated their arguments into utilitarian terms. If men stay overnight, they argued, the costs to the college will increase. How, you might wonder? Well, they'll want to take baths, and that'll use up hot water, they said. Furthermore, they argued, we'll have to replace the mattresses more often. The reformers met these arguments by adopting the following compromise. Each woman could have a maximum of 3 overnight male guests each week. They didn't say whether it had to be the same one or 3 different, provided, and this was the compromise, provided the guest paid 50 pence to defray the cost to the college. The next day, the national headline in the national newspaper read, St. Anne's girls 50 pence a night.
Now that's just
Another
fun.
illustration
That's just a
of the
fun,
difficulty
wholesome
of translating
headline.
all values, in this case a certain idea of virtue.
Yeah, I guess they're replacing the
into
mattresses because of sex. I don't really know.
So,
Like it
that's
breaks the
all
mattress
to
or like
illustrate
makes them dirty.
The
I
second
don't fully
objection
follow that, but
to utilitarianism, at least the part of that objection that questions whether utilitarianism is right to assume that we can assume the uniformity of value, the commensurability of all values, and translate all moral considerations into dollars or money. But there is a second aspect to this worry about aggregating values and preferences. Why should we weigh all preferences that people have without assessing whether they're good preferences or bad preferences? Shouldn't we distinguish between higher pleasures and lower
pence is like
Now,
the equivalent to a cent.
part of the appeal of not making any qualitative distinctions
Pences to
about the
pounds
worth
is
of people's
senses to
preferences,
dollars.
Part of the appeal is that it is non-judgmental and egalitarian. The Benthamite utilitarian says everybody's preferences count, and they count regardless of what people want, regardless of what makes different people happy. For Bentham, all that matters, you'll remember, are the intensity and the duration of a pleasure or pain. The so-called higher pleasures or nobler virtues are simply those, according to Bentham, that produce stronger, longer pleasure. He had a famous phrase to express this idea: the quantity of pleasure being equal, pushpin is as good as poetry. What was pushpin? It was some kind of a child's game, like tiddlywinks. Pushpin is
I don't
as
know. I
good
like
as
being
poetry,
black and white.
Bentham says. And lying behind this idea, I think, is the claim, the intuition, that it's a presumption to judge whose pleasures are intrinsically higher or worthier or better. And there is something attractive in this refusal to judge. After all, some people like Mozart, others Madonna. Some people like ballet, others bowling. Who's to say, a Benthamite might argue, who's to say which of these pleasures, whose pleasures, are higher, worthier, nobler than others? But is that right? This refusal to make qualitative distinctions. Can we altogether dispense with the idea that certain things we take pleasure in are better or worthier than others? Think back to the case of the Romans in the Colosseum. One thing that troubled people about that practice is that it seemed to violate the rights of the Christian. Another way of objecting to what's going on there is that the pleasure that the Romans take in this bloody spectacle should that pleasure, which is a base, kind of corrupt, degrading pleasure, should that even be valorized or weighed in deciding what the general welfare is? So here are the objections to Bentham's utilitarianism. And now we turn to someone who tried to respond to those objections, a later day utilitarian, John Stuart Mill. So what we need to
the guy from The Daily Show.
examine now is whether John Stuart Mill had a convincing reply to these objections to utilitarianism. John Stuart Mill was born in 1806. His father, James Mill, was a disciple of
It's a
Bentham.
good hairstyle.
And James Mill set about giving his son, John Stuart
Powerful
Mill, a
nose
model
on that guy.
education. He was a child prodigy, John Stuart Mill. He knew Greek at the age of 3, Latin at 8, and age 10, he wrote a history of Roman law. At age 20,
But was it good?
he had a nervous breakdown. This left
Okay,
him
bye,
in a
Wavy.
depression for 5 years. But at age 25, what helped lift him out of this depression is that he met Harriet Taylor. She and Mill got married. They lived happily ever after. And it was under her influence that John Stuart Mill tried to humanize utilitarianism. What Mill tried to do was to see whether the utilitarian calculus could be enlarged and modified to accommodate humanitarian concerns like the concern to respect individual rights, and also to address the distinction between higher and lower pleasures. In 1859, Mill wrote a famous book on liberty, the main point of which was the importance of defending individual rights and minority rights. And in 1861, toward the end of his life, he wrote the book we read as part of this course, Utilitarianism. He makes it clear that utility is
I
the
gotta
only
read this
standard
book.
of morality.
I've not.
In his view. So he's not challenging Bentham's premise. He's affirming it. He says very explicitly,
Supposed to be a good
the
one,
sole
though.
evidence it is possible to produce that anything is desirable is that people actually do desire it. So he stays with the idea that our de facto, actual, empirical desires are the only basis for moral judgment. But then, page 8, also in chapter 2, he argues that it is possible for a utilitarian to distinguish higher from lower pleasures. Now, those of you who have read Mill already, how, according to him, is it possible to draw that distinction? How can a utilitarian
Any guesses, chat?
distinguish qualitatively higher pleasures from lesser ones, base ones, unworthy ones? Yes?
If you've tried both of them and you'll prefer the higher one naturally, always.
That's great. That's right. What's your name?
John.
Boom, John.
So, as John points out, Mill says,
Not quick
here's
enough,
the
chat.
test.
Sorry, John beat you to it.
Since we can't step outside actual desires, actual preferences, that would violate utilitarian premises. The only test of whether a pleasure is higher or lower is whether someone who has experienced both would prefer it. And here, in chapter 2,
It's an insane
we
concept
see
to
the
try to
passage
wrap your brain
where Mill
around.
makes the point that John just described. Of two pleasures, if there be one to which all or almost all who have experience of both give a decided preference, irrespective of any feeling of moral obligation to prefer it, in other words, no outside, no independent standard, then that is the more desirable pleasure. What do people think about that argument? Does it succeed? How many think that it does succeed? Of arguing within utilitarian terms for a distinction between higher and lower pleasures. How many think it doesn't succeed? I want to hear your reasons. But before we give the reasons, let's do an experiment of Mill's claim.
We're on to Mill. We're talking about higher and lower
order to do this
pleasures
experiment,
and how to determine whether
we're going to
a
look
pleasure is higher or
at
lower.
3 short excerpts of popular entertainment. The first one is a Hamlet Soliloquy. It'll be followed by 2 other experiences. See what you think.
What a piece of work is a man. How noble in reason. How infinite in faculties. In form and moving, how express and admirable. In action, how like an angel. In apprehension, how like a god. The beauty of the world, the paragon of animals. And yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delights not me.
Shakespeare's so good, man. Whenever I get to hear Shakespeare's like performed by someone who actually like knows what the fuck they're doing, you're just like, damn. He wrote that shit. He really did it. He ate that up.
Each show, 6 contestants from around the country battle each other in 3 extreme stunts. These stunts are designed to challenge the contestants both physically and mentally. 6 contestants, 3 stunts, 1 winner. Fear factor.
Huge eruptive applause for Fear Factor.
Hi, diddly ho, pedal to the metalophiles.
Landers, since when do you like anything cool?
Well, I don't care for the speed, but I can't get enough of that safety gear. Helmets, roll bars, caution flags.
I like the fresh air and looking at the poor people in the infield.
Dang, Cletus, why'd you have to park by my parents?
Now, honey, it's my parents, too.
Even bigger pop for The Simpsons, and rightfully so. Virtually no reaction for Shakespeare.
I don't even have to ask which one you like most. The Simpsons, how many like The Simpsons most?
Of course.
How many Shakespeare?
Nerds.
What about Fear Factor? How many preferred Fear Factor? Really?
I really genuinely don't know what we're talking about here. I think it's just like...
Better.
Oh, we're talking about
Shakespeare. All right, now
higher and lower forms of pleasure. And the theory is like, whichever one, if you've experienced multiple ones, whichever one you like the most is the highest pleasure.
How many say Shakespeare?
And now I think this is an attempt to disprove that concept because it's like Shakespeare is supposed to be the like
How many say
upper class,
No, you can't.
fancy thing to like.
Really? What? All right, go ahead. You can say it.
I found that
It's a
one
good
of the
point,
most
Alex.
entertaining.
I know, but which do you think was the worthiest, the noblest experience? I know you found it the most entertaining.
If something is good just because it is pleasurable, what does it matter whether you have sort of an abstract idea of whether it is good by someone else's sense or not?
All right, so you come down in the straight Benthamite side. Who's to judge? And why should we judge? Apart from just registering and aggregating de facto preference. All right, that's fair enough. What's your name? Nate? Okay, fair enough. All right, so how many think The Simpsons is actually, apart from liking it, is actually the higher experience? Higher than Shakespeare. All right, let's see the vote for Shakespeare again. How many think Shakespeare is higher? All right, so why is it?
Shakespeare's pretty damn good.
Ideally, I'd like to hear from someone. Is there someone
The Simpsons.
who thinks Shakespeare
They're pretty
is
good
highest,
too.
but who preferred watching The Simpsons? Yes.
like, I guess just sitting watching The Simpsons, it's entertaining because they make jokes and they make us laugh, but like, someone has to tell us that Shakespeare was this great writer. We had to be taught how to read him, how to understand him. We had to be taught how to kind of take in Rembrandt, how to analyze a painting.
Well, what's your name?
Anisha.
Anisha, when you say someone told you that Shakespeare is better, are you accepting it on blind faith? You voted that Shakespeare is higher only because the culture tells you that, or teachers tell you that, or do you actually agree with that yourself?
Well, in the sense of Shakespeare, no, but earlier you made an example of Rembrandt. I feel like I would enjoy reading a comic book more than I would enjoy kind of analyzing Rembrandt because someone told me it was great, you know?
Right, so some of this seems to be, you're suggesting a kind of cultural convention and pressure. We're told what books, what works of art are great. Who else? Yes.
Although I enjoyed watching The Simpsons more in this particular moment in Justice, if I were to spend the rest of my life considering the 3 different video clips shown, I would not want to spend that remainder of my life considering the latter 2 clips. I think I would derive more pleasure from being able to branch out in my own mind, sort of considering more deep pleasures, more deep thoughts.
Nerd, liar.
And tell me your name.
Joe.
Joe. So, if you had to spend the rest of your life on a farm in Kansas with only Shakespeare or the collected episodes of The Simpsons, you would prefer Shakespeare? What do you conclude from that?
I mean, Mill's perspective was just that, like, whichever one you derive the most pleasure for one is the higher pleasure.
Whether people who have experienced...
So I think that's what he's challenging here.
Can I cite another example briefly?
Yeah.
And that there, despite there being
last year, we're told of a
other
rat
value
who
from
tested particular center
Shakespeare
in the brain
beyond
where
immediate
the rat
pleasure,
was able to stimulate its brain and cause itself intense pleasure repeatedly.
Simpsons
the rat
gives
did not
you
eat or
more
drink until
pleasure.
it died.
Sorry, I just missed what this kid said.
Can I cite another example briefly?
Yeah.
In neurobiology last year, we were told of a rat who was tested a particular center in the brain where the rat was able to stimulate its brain and cause itself intense pleasure repeatedly. The rat did not eat or drink until it died. So the rat was clearly experiencing intense pleasure. Now, if you ask me right now if I would rather experience intense pleasure or have a full lifetime of higher pleasure, I would consider intense pleasure to be low pleasure. I would right now enjoy intense pleasure. But, yes, I would. I certainly would.
Yeah, I think that's what this guy's getting at right now.
I would think almost a complete majority here would agree that they would rather be a human with higher pleasure than be that rat with intense pleasure for a momentary period of time.
So,
now, in answer to your question,
right.
I think this proves that, or I won't say proves, I think the conclusion is that Mill's theory that when a majority of people are asked what they would rather do, they will answer that they would rather engage in a higher pleasure.
So you think that this supports Mill? You think Mill is onto something here?
I do.
All right. Is there anyone who disagrees with Joe and who thinks that our experiment disproves Mill's test? Shows that that's not an adequate way, that you can't distinguish higher pleasures within the utilitarian framework. Yes.
If whatever is good is truly just whatever people prefer, it's truly relative and there's no objective definition, then there will be some society where people prefer Simpsons more. Anyone can appreciate The Simpsons, but I think it does take education to appreciate Shakespeare as much.
All right, you're saying it takes education to appreciate higher things. Mill's point is that the higher pleasures do require cultivation and appreciation and education. He doesn't dispute that. But once having been cultivated and educated, people will see not only see the difference between higher and lower pleasures, but will actually prefer the higher to the lower. You find this famous passage from John Stuart Mill, it is better
Tay, they just like the pretty colors and the silly voices.
than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. And if the fool or the pig are of a different opinion, it is because they only know their side of the question. So here you have an attempt to distinguish
Nickname, I really wish I could turn up the volume on the video. It's been such a struggle. I'm so
going to
sorry.
a museum or being a couch potato and swilling beer watching television at home.
Please
Sometimes
forgive
Mill
my
agrees we
inability
might
to use
succumb
OBS. I'm
to
still
the
learning.
temptation to do the latter, to be couch potatoes. But even when we do that, out of indolence,
Yeah, I'm on OBS, Alex. I haven't hooked up vMix yet. Next time I do this, I'm probably gonna do it on
pleasure
vMix.
we get.
Oh, there might be video captions. That's a good idea. I didn't even think about that. There for sure are. Thank you. Although it looks like they're being cropped out right now. I don't know why.
And it is a higher pleasure gazing at Rembrandt because it engages our higher human faculties.
What the
What
F?
about Mill's attempt to reply to the objection about individual rights?
Boom.
In a way, he uses the same kind of argument. And this comes out in chapter 5. He says, I dispute the pretensions of any theory which sets up an imaginary standard of justice not grounded on utility, but still he considers justice grounded on utility to be what he calls the chief part and incomparably the most sacred and binding part of all morality. So justice is higher. Individual rights are privileged, but not for reasons that depart from utilitarian assumptions. Justice is a name for certain moral requirements, which regarded collectively stand higher in the scale of social utility and are therefore of more paramount obligation than any others. So justice is sacred, it's prior, it's privileged. It isn't something that can easily be traded off against lesser things. But the reason is ultimately, Mill claims, a utilitarian reason once you consider the long-run interests of humankind, of all of us as progressive beings. If we do justice and if we respect rights, society as a whole will be better off in the long run. Well, is that convincing? Or is Mill actually, without admitting it, stepping outside?
Imagine if they did a shot of a kid taking notes and there were just a bunch of dicks drawn on the side of his notes.
For qualitatively higher
No, that would be good content.
and for
And also
sacred
would probably get
or
me
especially
TOS.
important individual rights. We haven't fully answered that question, because to answer that question in the case of rights and justice will require that we explore other ways, non-utilitarian ways of accounting for the basis of rights, and then asking whether they succeed. As for Jeremy Bentham, who launched utilitarianism as a doctrine in moral and legal philosophy, Bentham died in 1832 at the age of 85. But if you go to
Pretty
London,
good
you can
run for
visit him
1832.
today, literally. He provided in his will that his body be preserved, embalmed, and displayed in the University of London, where he still presides in a glass case with a wax head, dressed in his actual clothing.
Wow, let's go look that up right now. Holy shit! Oh my god. Oh, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. Imagine you're just walking to class. Oh, this is so scary. The photos look who is this guy? These are two different people. Yo, bruh. Why does this not make it bigger? Whatever. Oh, dude. Press F11 to escape. I want to escape. This is so insane. Yo, no. This is, ooh, there's a bug. This is so insane. Look at the eyes on my guy here. Why would they do my boy like that? Wow.
Died. Bentham addressed himself to a question consistent with his philosophy. Of what use could a dead man be to the living? One use, he said, would be to make one's corpse available to the study of anatomy. In the case of great philosophers, however, better yet, to preserve one's physical presence in order to inspire future generations. You want to see what Bentham looks like?
Oh, he did it.
Here's what he looks like. There he is.
This was in 2009 before they did the head.
You will notice that the embalming of his
funny.
actual head was not a success. So they substituted a wax
Oh, are they going to show the head?
And
I guess we didn't need to do the
bottom,
Google. Oh,
for
there it is.
verisimilitude, you can actually see his actual head on a plate.
That is
You see
inspiring.
it? Right there.
Do you feel
So,
inspired to pursue
what's the moral
philosophy
of the
because of
story?
that?
The moral of the story, by the way, they bring him out during meetings of the board at University College London, and the minutes record him as present but not voting.
That's insane. That's so cool.
In life and in death,
What a fucking insane
who
thing to do.
adhered to the principles of his philosophy. We'll continue with rights next time.
All right, GG, folks. That's gonna be the end of this one. What an ending, though. There's no way we top that ending. My goodness, good stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Soon throws up. Yeah, you just cut to the audience and half the kids are just puking in their chairs. All right, cool. So that's the end of that. We're probably going to do more of these. I don't cut to main cam. Hey guys, it's me. I'm big now. Yeah, that was fun. I want to try to come up with a way to make these more interactive in some way and like have it be less like me just like sitting quietly watching a YouTube video with you guys. Although they're good YouTube videos. So I'm probably gonna try to do like a little bit more prep for the next one and have some like actual shit to like talk about, so that it's not just watching the video the whole time. If you have stuff that you specifically want to talk about or like things that you would like to see covered, this is a very loose form. Just like kind of an excuse to like watch and talk about cool shit that I like. So we will probably continue to do these episodes of Justice, but maybe not. I don't know. If you like them, we'll continue doing them. If not, we will find some other stuff to do in this slot. But yeah, good first experience. I'm also going to try to continue to figure out how to use... see you at the gates. Wavy coming in with the $4. Thank you, Wavy. I appreciate that. See you at the gates of hell. Is that what you're talking about? Or the pearly gates? Either way, Anton, I'll meet you there. I like it, said Voidwalker. Oh, Voidwalker, I didn't even know you were in the mix. Oh, hell? Okay, cool. Yeah, see you there. But yeah, I don't really know. I don't know. I'm gonna do this on a different streaming software instead of OBS next time probably. So hopefully the audio will be not for shit. And that I think is it. So now I'm going to try to find somebody to raid, I guess. Thankful for someone finding really good videos. Cheers. Oh yeah, nickname. Thank you for joining. Yeah, all these videos are available on YouTube. They're free. They're right there whenever you want them. So you're welcome to skip ahead if you're still interested. I'm probably not going to do this again until next. Ooh, actually, I don't even know if I'm going to be around next week because I might be going on a little vacay. So I don't know if I will be around on Friday of next week. So there may be a week. It might be 2 weeks until I do this again. But if you're itching for more justice with Michael Sandell, you are welcome to go look it up on YouTube yourself. I think I posted a link to the video in our Discord. So if you're not in our Discord, you can go there, or you can just literally type Justice Harvard lecture, like any series of keywords from that video into YouTube, and it'll come up. It's got like a bunch of millions of views, so it's like it'll be like one of the first results. But you're welcome to skip ahead. Watching videos without a memeing chat is low quality. Yeah, it is. That is sort of like kind of why I did want to do this, because I love these videos, but I do also like memeing with the chat. That definitely adds a little spice, a little flavor to the video, and I just like am curious about your guys' opinions on this stuff. More fun to watch with other people, for sure. Yes. And to that end, I want to make this segment, this whatever you want to call this, not really a show. It's mostly just me watching a thing while you guys watch. But I want to make it less that. I want to make it more of a show and less of just like a React Andy type situation. So to that end, I'm going to try to, maybe since I'll have 2 weeks potentially before I do the next one. I don't know when the next one's going to be. It might be next Friday. It might be 2 Fridays from now. It might be sometime in between on a different day. I don't know. It's just kind of when I feel like doing it. But I'm going to try to make it more interactive in some way, like have actual shit to talk about, have more questions specifically posed for the chat so that we can get some more good yeah, the polls are fun. I just feel like when there's only like 9 people in the chat, it's just easy enough to just like, it's easier to just be like, what do you think? And then you can just type it in the chat rather than have like 2 people vote in a poll and then we talk about that. But if there's more people in the chat, do a poll now. I don't have my poll thing. Oh, actually I do have my poll thing up, but I don't know if I have the overlay on here. But yeah, if you have ideas, like I said, always suggestion box. As with all of my independent streams, I like to hear what you guys think of these things, how you want to make them better. Okay, seems like the polls are a win. Pog champion. Okay, cool. So I guess we'll keep doing polls. We'll have to come up with some things to poll about. So if you have ideas, please post them in the suggestion box in our Discord. If you haven't joined our Discord, please join our Discord. If you haven't followed us on Twitch, do that. If you haven't followed us on the other things like Twitter, do that. If you haven't followed me on Twitter, do that, at Jake Ellenbogen. Can I type that in the chat? Follow me on Twitter. I post jokes completely unrelated to philosophy. But yeah, we're going to figure out what this show is going to be. Am I on OnlyFans? Not yet. But if you're interested in that content, please also post that in the suggestion box. If we get enough hype going there, maybe I'll start that up too. That's it. That's all I got. I'm going to now try to find somebody to send you guys over to. Who should I raid? I'm going to close this poll too. Looks like a unanimous 4 votes for yes. We love to see it. Okay, who's online? Stand by. Who do we got? Oh, Danny Panny. We're gonna send you guys over to Danny Panny, our friend down in Brazil. They're playing Fall Guys. So I'm gonna send you over to them. Say hi. Tell them Everything Now Show sent you. Although they'll get an alert that says that, so I guess you don't need to tell them. But say hi for me to Danny Panny. And we have a normal Everything Now show. Normal meaning our interactive sketch improv comedy show that we do Sundays and Wednesdays. We have one on Sunday at the new time slot, which of course is now 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you like this show, it's absolutely nothing like this, but arguably much better and more entertaining, certainly more interactive. I'll be there. The rest of the Everything Now Showcast will be there. That's Sunday at 7 o'clock. So come hang out and say hi to Danny. And that's the end of the show. And yes, the main shows are wild. Yes, please come to the main show. That is the bread and butter of this channel. And we will see you then. Will Election Map Guy be there? Yes, Election Map Guy will be there. So if you like him better than me, or the same as me, or even less than me, you're going to want to tune in either way, Sunday, 7 p.m. Pacific Time, same place. And we'll see you then. Okay, bye.